for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bustin Brackets. We're going to be chatting with him about the top teams in all of college basketball, why that tier number 2 saw us a lot of feistiness, a lot of good teams in there. We're going to be taking a look at the landscape of the Atlantic 10, the ACC, and a few games for Tuesday. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did get in actually a few Twitter/X questions, and they're sort of related. I had a few questions asking why I'm typically in on unders a little bit more than overs, if that's intentional, and if I really gauge some of these trends, like the home unranked team being the favorite over the ranked road team, and typically I will take a shot on a lot of those unranked home teams as a favorite, but that's not intentional. I'm not really a guy that is looking at trends. I'm not thinking, oh, I have to be on unders or anything like that. If you've noticed, for those of you guys that follow along with the spreadsheet that I post up on the old Twitter/X along with on VSiN, I post up my handicaps and I make my handicaps days in advance, and this is way before any bookmakers have any lines on any games. Now, obviously, I adjust if I have a team that is playing on Thursday and then they're playing again on Saturday. Based on what happens on that Thursday, I might make a little bit of like a half a point tweak, something like that. So it's not like totally set in stone, but days in advance, I'm taking a look at these situations. I'm trying to gauge the scheduling spot, and I think to myself, all right, what do I think that this line should be? And then from there, I decide whether or not I'm going to play it or not. Sometimes I land on that unranked home team. Sometimes I land on the ranked team that might be catching points, things like that, and there's no real agenda for me landing on unders or anything like that. That's just what I personally feel like the total should be, and oftentimes bookmakers will shade their totals up a little bit, so it would make sense that I'm in on a few more unders rather than overs. So hopefully that does explain a few of those questions for you guys, and you can always see those daily handicap lines. I always post up the link on the old Twitter/X, and it's up on VSiN as well for those of you guys who are subscribers. So we've got you guys all covered there, and I've got you guys all covered with what we saw in a fun college basketball Monday. Let's try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
We had 2 ranked teams in action, and both were able to get the job done. Nebraska, one of those ranked road teams that was the underdog, won outright over Ohio State 72-69. The final cold 3-point shooting in this one for Nebraska. They only go 8 of 29 from 3, but they won the rebound battle 38-29. And for Ohio State, 8 of 13 at the free throw line, 14 out of 17 for Nebraska. Holds greater than some of its parts approach, with Braden Frager off the bench giving you 15 points. He was the main man, and John Mobley did have 22 points for Ohio State, but then got 0 points off the bench, so Nebraska, very nice win. And then for Michigan State, they absolutely land-based USC 80-51 the final. Obviously, the Rodney Rice injury very much getting to USC at this point, and they stood no chance on the glass. USC loses the rebound battle 39-30. For USC, just 3 of 17 from 3-point range. They lose the turnover battle as well, 17-12. And for Michigan State, Cohen Carr, he was able to drive this team with 18 points, 6 rebounds. So nice quality winners there. In terms of the unranked teams, you saw a harebrained game between Columbia and Cornell. Cornell's been one of your better over teams, 104-99. Columbia gets the job done. Columbia 10 of 23 from 3 for Cornell, 15 out of 33 from the outside, and Columbia wins the rebound battle 35-34. They do lose the turnover battle 16-12, but for Columbia, 28 out of 33 at the free throw line, and Blair Thompson was able to supply 26 points. On the flip side for Cornell, you had in this game 6 different guys give you double figures, including 4 different guys scored 15 plus points, but defense was not there for them, so Columbia finds a way to be able to persevere. Now, this game was interesting. Princeton has just not been what we've seen from them in past years, but there were a lot of places that closed this line more around 2 2.5, but if you took the points with Penn at a 2.5 plus, you actually got there. So this was very dependent upon what line you bet it at. And Cornell, by the way, I should throw this in there. They're now 4-8 against the spread. And Princeton is actually 10-5 against the spread with the result that we saw on Monday, 78-76, the final for Princeton. Just 7 of 19 from three-point, but shot 54% from the floor. And Penn won the rebound battle, 35-23, and Penn 19 of 19 at the free throw line, but Penn also lost the turnover battle, 13-10. So that one was a interesting one, to say the least. One of your better over teams in all of college basketball has actually been Southern. Southern 9 overs to 3 unders thus far this season. And they were able to go out there and get you another over against Prairie View, but they don't get the job done outright. 89-85. Prairie View is able to get the win over Southern, as Southern 7 of 15 from 3. Prairie View 6 of 15 from the outside, but two teams that pride themselves on generating turnovers, 13 apiece, and lots of free throw shooting. For Southern, 28 out of 35 at the free throw line, 17 out of 24 from Prairie View. So things were able to get a little bit harebrained and crazy there. And this has been a Prairie View team that has actually been able to do a nice job against the spread. They're up to 8-2 against the spread. And out there in the SWAC, Grambling has now been 9-4 against the spread in year number 1 of Patrick Curry. And for Grambling, they get the win. They get the cover over Texas Southern, 84-57, the final. And man, if you've been betting on Texas Southern this year, 1-10 against the spread. I believe that is dead stinking last in all of college basketball. So that has been unsightly, to say the least, as for Texas Southern, they go 8 of 21 from 3, but they allow Grambling to go 12 of 28 from 3. For Texas Southern, they lose the turnover battle 16-12, and you had 21 big points in this game for Grambling out of Roderick Coffey. Man, that followed Patrick Curry on over from Florida A&M, so that was a quality winner. Rutgers in overtime takes it to Oregon, this by a count of 88-85. Oregon was a road favorite, and for Oregon, you want to talk about teams that have been rough against the spread thus far this season. This one drops them to now a good hearty 5-10. Rutgers also 5-10 against the spread, so these have not been profitable teams, to say the least. And for Oregon, Nate Biddle was solid. He had 28 points, 8 rebounds. For Oregon, they win the rebound battle 43-32, but for Rutgers, they go 30 out of 34 at the free throw line. Tariq Francis off the bench, 30 points, 10 of 11 at the free throw line. Nobody else had more than 13 points in this game, so Rutgers does find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done, and two teams have been a disappointment against the spread, to say the least. Yale has not been a disappointment, though. 70-53, they're able to lay it on the Brown Bears as they go 6 of 17 from 3, and for Brown, they lose a rebound battle 44-36. They go just 6 of 10 at the free throw line. Just not a lot doing in general for them, though I will say for Brown, they have been able to cover a few spreads as far this season with this loss and the non-cover. Brown still 8-5 against the spread, and for Yale, they're now back to 6-6 against the spread. By the way, going back to Penn, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, they're now up to 8-5 against the spread themselves, and this team has been very interesting, as UW Green Bay last year was one of your least profitable teams in all of college basketball, doing a little bit better this year. In the battle for the great state of Wisconsin, they're able to take down at UW Green Bay, 79-76 the final. All of a sudden, Green Bay is 8-6 against the spread. So we've got a little bit of fun time action going on there, and this has been a UW Green Bay team that, by the way, has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of giving up points as well. So they've been 7-7 to the over and the under thus far this season. But for UW Green Bay, they win this game thanks to a big performance out of one Mr. Justin Allen, 21 points. He doesn't take any threes, but does a nice job getting to the free throw line, and C.J. O'Hara, 8 of 8 from before. UW Green Bay, by the way, shot 62% from the field, 28 out of 45. They slowed things down quite a bit, and UW Milwaukee does go 10 of 22 from three-point range, but they find a way to be able to persevere. William and Mary, America's favorite tag team, has also been one of the best teams against the spread in all of college basketball. Unable to pull this one out, though. They are now 11-2 against the spread, so still doing a very good job in terms of being able to yield a profit there. But Charleston, a team that was very banged up to begin the season, they find a way to be able to get it done in this one, this by a count of 88-79. And for Charleston, they now have back in the fold Mr. Kobe Duggan. Game number 3 for him, 17 points. That was tied for the team lead. And for Charleston, they win the rebound battle 47-39. And William and Mary, who prides themselves on being able to pop it and lock it from 3, just 9 of 36 from 3. Charleston, they go 11 11 of 29 from three-point range, so that played a big role in this one. And then if you're taking a look at a little bit of Southland action, Stephen F. Austin is no longer generating turnovers the way that they have in past seasons, but defense still rock solid, 66-64. McNeese gets a win, but Stephen F. Austin in a lot of places were right around about a 10-point underdog. They hold in there, and for Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, they're able to go 10 of 27 from three-point range, so they do a nice job covering that, and Stephen F. Austin is out 11-2 against the spread this far this season, and despite the great record for McNeese, 5-6-1 against the spread for them. And if you're looking at a Southland team that has been a little bit harebrained in terms of their totals thus far this season, we've been finding a lot of overs with Northwestern State. They're now up to 9 overs and 4 unders thus far this season, and for Northwestern State, it's been an almighty struggle for them on the glass. They do find a way to cover against Nichols, though, 74-72 the final for Northwestern State. They do win the rebound battle 36-31. They were without William Williams, their top rebounder, in the first 6 or so games of the season. He had 12 boards, and for Nichols, just 5 of 21 from 3, 5 of 22 for Northwestern State, but both teams did a rock solid job in terms of getting to the free throw line, and that was a total that closed in a lot of places more in that neighborhood of about a 144.5, so you were able to just get there in terms of that total. And then this team has been pretty solid to the under. UT Rio Grande Valley, 5 overs to 8 unders. Your best under team, by the way, in the conference has been Stephen F. Austin with only 4 overs thus far this season. But for Grand Valley, they do find a way to be able to get this one through against Incarnate Word, 80-67 the final. Incarnate Word just 7-23 from 3, and Incarnate Word playing slowly but not playing great defense. UT Rio Grande Valley only 9-32 from 3-point range, but Philip Brankovich, he was able to supply 29 points, and this was a closing total that was more in that neighborhood, about a 146.5, so you just barely were able to get the over on that one. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been a very interesting season, to say the least, where the overs and the unders are about as even Stevens as it gets, with the over hitting at 50.1%, 1,215 overs, 1,210 unders. Favorites are right now about 49.7% against the spread. They've had a large lead all season long, but the underdogs are starting to bark. 1,193, 1,205, and 38 against the spread for favorites, as if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, favorites are getting just killed. 138, 164 on 4 against the spread. That's 45.7% against the spread for favorites, and over the last 7 days, we've been seeing some overs. About a 51.5% clip, 157 overs, 148 unders, and if my math serves me correct, 2 pushes. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're getting trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Tristan Freeman of Bustin Brackets right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Bustin Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Tristan Freeman aboard. He does such great work over at Bustin Brackets, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's dialed in on a little bit of everything, whether that's taking a look at the Atlantic 10, ACC, just the landscape of these mid-majors, as well as he's based out there in the lovely city of Pittsburgh, doing a great job as well over at Sleepers Media, doing some work over at the Field of 66 Hoops68 and so much more. And you're able to follow him on the old Twitter /X at HoopsNut351 all together. And Tristan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And Tristan, it certainly has been a fun first 2 months of college basketball. And I'm not sure about you, but do you feel like there's a little bit of a trend growing that we saw from last year where there were a few top teams in college basketball and everyone else? Because I just take a look at those main three teams in Iowa State, Arizona, and then also Michigan, with them certainly being that number one team. And it just feels like there's a big country divide between those three teams and everyone else right now.
Yeah, they certainly look the most impressive, but I still think the likes of, preseason top teams, Purdue and Houston, still have plenty of talent. Gonzaga has been highly impressive. Yeah, they just went to overtime with Seattle, but they're still just as good as anyone. And then, teams like Duke, arguably with the best player in the country, they should be up there as well. So I do think that the top tier is probably bigger than that. But if you wanted to divide them into a couple, I understand that too.
It's certainly been a lot of fun to be able to watch these teams, and we're certainly going to be seeing Michigan on display in your home state of Pennsylvania on Tuesday. And just how do you take a look at this Michigan team? Because they have now won 10 straight games by at least 18 points apiece, all but one of them by at least 25 points. But we have seen it when it comes to teams that have been very dominant early on during the season, have a little bit of a January lull. I think back to those two title teams of UConn a few years ago, and both of those had a little bit of a lull in January. And how big of a month do you think that this is for Michigan? Because I do think that this level of dominance is going to be hard to maintain no matter who you are.
Yeah, and don't forget that they're also going to be playing true road games, which can be as good equalizer as possible. So they'll have to deal with that. But it's been highly impressive, and they're going to be, everyone's team to beat, even though Purdue was the preseason number one team, Michigan State was the defending champions. There's going to be a ton of eyes rightfully on Wolverines, and it'll be interesting to see how they recover. And look, this is also a team that still struggled with TCU and Wake Forest earlier on, so they're beatable, but this hot streak, we'll see how long it lasts. It could potentially last a couple of months.
Yep, it's been a lot of fun to watch this Michigan team. You just don't see dominance like that at the power conference level, so that has certainly been intriguing. As Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bustin Brackets, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And one team that might have been lumped in with those top three, top four teams a few weeks ago that has been a little bit shaky recently is Duke. And now Duke is probably going to get their biggest test of the ACC conference when they go on the road. They face off against Louisville. No doubt when they face off against North Carolina, that's going to be a big one as well. But how do you take a look at this Duke team going against a Louisville bunch that is most likely going to be without Mikal Brown? But we have seen Duke here in the first few games of ACC conference play not be as dominant as a lot of people expected.
And, it's the annual tradition for Duke to struggle with Georgia Tech early in conference play for one reason or another. But it's going to be very fascinating to see how well they handle a Louisville team who still can't shoot the ball with Ryan Cromwell and Isaac McNeely. But yeah, this is a Duke team who, outside of Cameron Boozer, can potentially struggle to score. Isaiah Evans is coming off of a career high. He has the potential, but he's been inconsistent as well. So I think the key for Duke is going to be just which guys emerge as the consistent second and third option on offense, because you are going to need more than Cameron Boozer to advance deep in March.
Yep, it certainly is going to be interesting. And would you say that that's the biggest issue right now for Duke? Because right now, Cameron Boozer is the top facilitator, and he's right now the odds-on favorite to be able to win the Wooden Award, rightfully so. He's been rock solid, but I just feel like with Isaiah Evans, Caleb Foster, they need to give this team a little bit more, because while the low post play, the interior play has been so good for Duke, it does feel like the guard play has been a little bit more shaky than expected.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't had the leap from Foster as they would have hoped. I think Cade Boozer was always someone that was going to be a little more of a project coming in. Darren Harris has had, his moments, but maybe not have been the elite guy in his second year. So yeah, I mean, the backcourt was always going to be a concern for them, and just seeing where they can get the consistent offense. I think it's been good, but not great. But they're going to need someone to sort of break out soon for them to not only avoid any bad losses in ACC play, but to make the potential Final Four run.
Yep, and for Duke, I do think that it's actually going to be to their benefit if they want to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. That I want to get your thoughts here, that the ACC, it just feels like is a little bit deeper this year than it has been the last few years, because they're going to be going up against Louisville on Tuesday. They're a bona fide top 25 team. They're rock solid. Even with their loss to SMU, North Carolina has looked good to begin the year. The team that they lost to at SMU has been solid. NC State, Virginia. It just feels like the ACC has more depth than they've had in past years. Certainly they've got a slug out there in Boston College as doing nobody any favors in the conference, but even teams like Syracuse just feel much improved from what they have been in past years.
Well, I mean, it helps that they collectively had a better non-con than they had in the past, which automatically elevates all the top half teams. And even those in the bubble, like Virginia Tech, Virginia, Wake Forest, they look confident so far. And you can add NC State to that as well. So just having a better middle, ultimately it's going to be better. And then when you have teams like, UNC having good non-con, it helps an SMU when an SMU handles business at home and beats them. And that's how you have a bigger bubble than you've had in the past. And so far it's been solid for them. But ultimately we'll see how it works out in league play, because you're going to have to avoid losses to the bottom teams like Pitt, BC, Georgia Tech, and we'll see how the California schools do, but you have to avoid losses to them. And so far, so good. But again, it's only been 1 week of league play.
Yep, no doubt about it. As Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bustin Brackets, he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Tristan, when it comes to those more, shall we say, upper middle teams in the ACC, I think that might be the proper terminology for it. Is there one or two that stand out to you? And when it's all said and done, you feel like they might be able to win a game or two in the NCAA tournament, and they might be feisty, because we just talked about these teams like Wake Forest, Syracuse. It does feel like that middle is very much improved, and I do think that there's quite a bit of upside with some of these teams, especially if Toby Luell has been out for quite a while, returns for Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech is going to be a team that I named because they've been able to hold fort without him. He's an all ACC caliber player. I mean, Amari Hansberry has been fine for them to transfer from West Virginia, and Neo Advalis has been a really good freshman player for them. But he's also, can be inconsistent at times. But when you have a front court like them and you have good shooting guards, Virginia Tech is a team that absolutely can do some damage.
I do think that with Virginia Tech, you've got some upside there. They're a team that I think is going to be really interesting, and we are going to be seeing some fun matchups that are going to be going down on Tuesday. I highlighted that Duke versus Louisville game because that might be the biggest game of the night with regards to the ACC, but certainly I take a look at that Syracuse versus Georgia Tech game as one of being of intrigue as well, because with Georgia Tech, yes, this has been a team that has had their struggles early on during the season. The Maryland Eastern Shore game was not great, but we also saw them go to the wire with Duke. We also saw them in non-conference play. They had a little bit of a tight game against Georgia. They needed to probably win that game against Mississippi State. That was a little bit rough for them, but I do feel like for Syracuse, getting back Donnie Freeman, if they can win this game, this would be big for propelling them to perhaps getting on the bubble as well.
Pitt's been competitive, but they're clearly one of the bottom teams in the league. You have to win road games like this if you're Syracuse, because I don't think 9-9 is going to be good enough for them. So this is a game that they have to win, and obviously getting Donnie Freeman back is huge. But the backcourt, Nathan George and J.J. Starlin, has been sort of weak spot for them, and they're going to have to play well on the road if they're going to get this win and be a tournament team, because that's probably what's going to take in order for Autry to feel good about his job status.
Yes, no question about it. I do think that this is going to be big moving forward for Syracuse, as it is year number 3 for Autry, as you mentioned before. And man, that is going to be very intriguing to see what we get in that game. And then I think that we've got some fun ones going down the Atlantic 10 as well. I know that you do a great job covering that conference with Duquesne being in your neck of the woods. The big one on Tuesday is going to be George Washington versus Dayton. And how have you taken a look at this Atlantic 10? Because it just feels like it's the same sort of curse that the Atlantic 10 has year in and year out, where they don't necessarily have that one bona fide top team other than St. Louis. St. Louis looked really good in the non-conference, and in my opinion, they've been a top 40 team in all of college basketball, but other than them, there's no shoo-in for an at-large bid. But Dayton and George Washington, who go at it on Tuesday, they've got a chance to be able to make some noise. As we know, VCU has been there. You've had pleasant surprises like a Richmond, even for lack of a better term, a Fordham as well. And when it comes to the Atlantic 10, I think that's very important that these top teams like like a George Mason, the two teams that go at it in George Washington and Dayton on Tuesday, they take care of business against the lesser teams, because it does feel like, once again, we sort of have a divide between those top teams and the teams that really struggled in non-conference play.
Well, I mean, the biggest storyline almost happened on Saturday when you have Loyola Chicago, who had a horrific non-card campaign with some brutal losses to pretty much tank their numbers. They beat Rhode Island to start out league play, and they should have beaten Dayton. So it's going to be very interesting to see how teams deal with them, because clearly, talent-wise, the Ramblers are good, but we'll see whether or not they remain competitive. But Dayton's season almost ended on Saturday with the loss to the Ramblers. So we'll see what happens to some of the other teams like VCU, who still have a shot. St. Louis, of course, right now, Loyola Chicago is a quad 4 road loss. They're going to have to find a way to avoid that. And if they can, then I do think they can get multiple bids. And it's a very competitive talk with the teams that you mentioned, but also teams like Duquesne and Davidson who can be competitive. So those are going to be some teams to watch as well.
Yes, it is going to be a lot of fun. And is there any other games that are just really catching your eye with regards to Tuesday card? Because we do have ourselves what I would consider to be a card that has a good amount of games. There's like 29 or 30 games on the card, but I do take a look up and down the boulevard, whether you're looking at a little bit of Atlantic 10 play, ACC, Big Ten, SEC. There's just a lot of good games in general. Anything in particular that you just have your eyes on for this Tuesday?
I would say that the Georgia-Florida game probably stands out, because it's one of those to where the Gators are 10-point favorites at home, but it's Georgia that's ranked. Obviously the Bulldogs have had a good non-con, but I do think people are still questioning whether or not they're going to be legitimate contenders. But if they can get a win over the reigning national champs, that would be huge. So I think that's a big respect game. And by the way, if the Gators lose this one and the guards struggle, then they're going to be in real doubts as to whether or not they're even a postseason team at that point.
Yeah, with this Florida team, they've just lost so many close games, and the low post play has been great. They've been number one in all of college basketball in terms of rebound percentage, but Boogie Fland has not worked out the way that they expected. I'm almost wondering if they start Urban Klavsdar at some point, because he's been pretty rock solid for them. So lots of question marks with regards to that backcourt. And Mike White used to be the coach over at Florida. You know that he would love nothing more than to be able to take them down. So that's going to be a really good game to watch. And I know you, Tristan, have your finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything college basketball, whether that be the teams out there in the Pittsburgh area, whether that be the ACC, just the national landscape, and you do so at so many different outlets. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can just follow me at Hoopsnut351 on Twitter/X, and pretty much just posting all about college basketball for Bustin Brackets and the other main sites, and can't wait to see what happens with league play now fully underway.
Yes, we are in full-fledged conference play, which means that we are going to be getting some great matchups. Tristan, he's doing an amazing job of being able to break it all down, and every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So a big thanks to Tristan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you a picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family podcast. Always great to be joined by Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Bustin Brackets, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first. If we did have extra games, those will be at the bottom. Those involve smaller conferences. It does not appear as though we have any of those games, so you know what? That keeps things all nice, clean, and easy. So let's get things started card. 601, 602 on the card. Ohio plays those to UMass. UMass is an underdog of 3.5 points. 156.5 is the total. I did set a total here of a 150.5. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got an Ohio team that last year was pretty up-tempo. They become a little bit more mid-tempo this season. Now, you do have a UMass team that is going to be looking to push a lot of tempo in terms of total possessions per game. This UMass bunch is right around about 28th in all of college basketball. That compares to Ohio at 114th, but this UMass team is also 82nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I did say UMass as a favorite. I just like them outright on the money line, mainly because this UMass team is going to be able to control the board. 66th in the country in terms of rebound percentage. That climbs to 50th in games played away from home. Ohio, 272nd, and this is an Ohio team that has been awful with their three-point shooting at 27%. That is outside the top 355 in all of college basketball. Jackson Paveleski has been good in the backcourt for Ohio. He's supplying 17 points, 4 assists. He shoots 37% from 3, and then A.J. Shelton, he's been able to shoot about 35.5% from 3. Lone two guys on the roster shooting above 30.5% from 3. Aiden Hadaway, 13.7 rebounds per game. Lone guy on the roster with over 5 rebounds per game, Javion Simmons. He's been able to give you about 5 boards, 12.5 points per contest. He's the only other guy that gives you more than 4 rebounds per game. So this has been a team that's just been in misery there. And for this Massachusetts bunch, it is one that was really bad with their three-point shooting last year. And I'm not going to sit here and say that there's some amazing three-point shooting team this year, but it's better at about 34%. That's right around about country average. And they themselves have been a top 15 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Marcus Banks has uplifted that backcourt, 37.5% three-point shooter, 16 points per game. Kajal Parker, he supplies 11.5 points, shoots 45% from 3, and actually 96% of the free throw line. That is an issue for UMass. They're outside the top 320 in terms of their free throw shooting percentage at 65.9%, so that's not necessarily been the world's greatest, but with the way that they're able to play good lockdown defense and the way that this is an Ohio team that really doesn't grab for themselves second and third chances, even though UMass has been a little bit careless with the ball. They are currently ranking 270th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but more country average away from them. I think that they get the job done, and I think that they dominate the board. Semi-total at a 150.5, like the under, and like UMass on the money line, made them the 2.5 point favorite. 603, 604 on the card. St. John's is on the road against Butler, and Butler is a bit of a home underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points. 161.5 is a total, and made a total of 163.5. I do like the over. You do have two teams that are looking to play at a very aggressive pace. Butler is 47th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, have slowed down a little bit more recently, and St. John's really not slowing down a lot. They're 27th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and with St. John's, they're still not necessarily like a creme de la creme three-point shooting team, but after they were well outside the top 300 last year, it is much improved this season. They're shooting about 35% from three-point shots, a top 135 mark. You have Zuby Ejiofor doing a nice job blocking it down low, 16 points, 8 boards, 2.5 blocks per game, and he actually shoots about 32% from 3. Osiah Sellers, Drew Sansanon have been those main three-point shooters. Combined shoot about 41% from the outside, 21 points between the two of them. St. John's has been having a few issues with regards to their backcourt. They're outside the top 180 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and they're allowing a lot of second chances. They're outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but they are also a team that has been a top 75 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, one of the best teams with regards to their interior defense, and they go up against a Butler team that's been about country average with their three-point shooting at 34.5%. Michael Jai has been incredible, 16.5 points, 12.5 boards. His three-point shooting has never gotten back to where it was when he was in the WCC. He's only shooting 26% from 3, but then you have Evan Haywood, Jamie Kaiser, both shooting 40+% from 3. You did have Jalen Jackson shooting over 40% from 3, but he's out for the season. Then Finley Bizjack doing a nice job doling it out, 16 points, 2.5 assists per game for a Butler team that has been a top 130 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're not going to force the issue themselves. They are well outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but what I think is going to be the undoing for this Butler team is that they aren't necessarily the strongest team inside with regards to their opponent's two-point shooting percentage. Now, Butler is generating for themselves a lot of second and third chances, but they have been allowing a lot of open looks from inside the arc. They're outside the top 85 with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage, while percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, 17th in the country. They grab about 37% of their misses as an offensive rebound, but St. John's 23rd, they're right there. So do think that you get a lot of second and third chances, perhaps a game close enough for late game fouling. So by total 163.5, like the over. And with St. John's, made them the 5.5 point favorite, willing to lay up to 5 with them. 6-5, 6-6 on the card. Georgia is going to be on the road against Florida. For you country music fans, the Florida-Georgia line is Florida being an 8.5 to a 9.5 point favorite. 171.5 to 172.5 is the total. I'm in on the under. I did set my total at a 167.5. I recognize that both of these teams are playing super duper fast, especially Georgia. Georgia is currently, in terms of total possessions per game, hovering right in that neighborhood of number 2 in all of college basketball. Florida a little bit slower than that, but still, I mean, my goodness, this is a bunch that they are clocking in right around about 61st in terms of total possessions per game, but Florida just has not done a great job with regards to their backcourt, and that's a big reason why I'm going to be willing to take the points with Georgia. Georgia is one of the best teams in terms of generating turnovers, 30th in the nation in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Florida, 290th in terms of turnovers per possession at home, 347th with their three-point shooting percentage at 28%. Urban Klavsar has actually been the top three-point shooter for this team. I don't understand why he's not getting more minutes, but with Florida, Boogie Fland has just been a big giant boogie of a disappointment for them, as he's not even providing more than 12 points per contest. He's been just from three-point range shooting about 20% from three. He gives you 3 assists to about 1.6 turnovers per game. Thomas Haw has been the main scorer for this team, 17 points per game, and this Florida team leads the country in terms of rebound percentage. You've got Haw giving you about 6.5 rebounds per game, Alex Condon, 14.5 points, 8.5 boards, Ruben Chinyelu, 10.5 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. So, I mean, these guys have been great. Hand logged in is able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. The low post play for Florida is great. Top 30 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, just no perimeter play whatsoever. And I'm not saying that this Georgia team is like some sort of a 3-point shooting wordsmith or something like that. They're shooting about 32% from three themselves, but they've been a top 30 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 55 team in terms of rebound percentages. It's a whole is greater than some of its parts approach with regards to their rebounding. For Georgia, you only have one guy that gives you over 5.4 rebounds per game. That'd be Samtu Surreal, who's been supplying 10 points, 3 blocks, 6.5 rebounds per game. And then you have 4 other guys between 4.6 and 5.4 rebounds per game. Justin Abson, who doesn't give you a lot of scoring, has been a big part of that. And with this Georgia team, even though you don't have amazing 3-point shooting, you've been able to have Jeremiah Wilkerson step up, shoot 36% from 3, 18 points per game. And Marcus Millender comes in off the bench, shoots 40% from 3, 11.5 points per contest. Georgia is going to give up a lot of second and third chances on the glass, but with the way that they're a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball, I think that keeps them lively. And Georgia, also a top 15 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, should fall off a little bit here against Florida, but I think that they do enough to be able to hold in this game. So I set my total at a 167.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to take 6+ here with Georgia, 607, 608 on the card. Cincinnati, and yes, we're on to Cincinnati, who's onto the road, facing off against West Virginia. West Virginia is a favorite of 2.5 points. Total, you're going to be getting that at a 129.5, and I'm going to be in on the over. I did set my total at a 132.5. I think that just the raw possessions that Cincinnati plays with, and this game being close enough for late game following is going to do it for Cincinnati. Currently, they are 81st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it is West Virginia team. They are looking to play very slow, 341st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and this West Virginia defense is good enough to be able to match up with Cincinnati, and they're much better on offense. So I did set West Virginia as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. Cincinnati, sloppy, 236th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 305th in a road/huge court venue. And for this Cincinnati team, they're not taking care of the ball, 242nd in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Getting back Jizzle James, that's been able to help them out a little bit, as he's been able to average about 11.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest, and offense really stands that game against Houston. Has been a little bit better. Understandable that you don't score a lot of points against Houston, but still a team that shoots 31.5% from 3, that's outside the top 270 in all of college basketball. James really doesn't address that. You got Kirk Reese giving you 7.5 points, 4 assists per contest, but I mean, the main name of the game for Cincinnati is rebounding. They've been a top 20 rebound rate team. You've got Bob Miller giving you 13.5 points, about 11.5 rebounds per game. Mustafa Team, 7 boards, 2 blocks per game. So, I mean, the interior play is really good for this Cincinnati team. That said, for West Virginia, I know that he's not necessarily like the biggest scorer in the world, but the 7-footer Harlan Obiana has been pretty solid. He's been able to supply this team with about 5.5 rebounds per game, gives you about 6.5 points. Hunter Ruff has been the main headline scorer, shooting 40% per 3, 16.5 points per contest, and West Virginia at home is a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, top 10 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, West Virginia, they themselves are outside the top 150 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but they do a solid job on the glass as well. This is a top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They are going to be able to match up well with Cincinnati, in my opinion, and with West Virginia being a top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball, having Brennan Lorient being able to give you 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. They've dealt with some injuries with Chance Moore being in and out of the lineup, but returned against Iowa State, had 17 points in that one. He's averaging double figures. I think that that's enough for West Virginia to be able to go out there and get the job done. So by total 132.5, I like the over, and with West Virginia willing to lay up to 6 with them. 609, 610 on the card. Syracuse is going to be on the road against Georgia Tech, and the Ramblin' Wreck of Georgia Tech is a 2.5 to a 3.5 point home underdog. 144.5 to 145.5 is the total. Semi-total at a 142.5. So I do like the under. You've got a Syracuse team that has been playing some really good defense, and they entered into the weekend dead last in the country in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. Might have shot up. Yes, they did. They're now 364th in the country. Appalachian State has unseated them as the worst team in terms of free throw shooting percentage in all of college basketball, but that goes down to 55.8% at a road/neutral court venue. Still dead last at a road/neutral court venue, so that's not great to say the least, and that does have me a bit skittish on Syracuse. I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite, so 3+, that does become my buy point on Georgia Tech, and I do think that that could come into a big giant play here, because you do have two teams that have been top 50 teams in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. A little bit of a tempo war here. Syracuse is about 240th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got a Georgia Tech team that's really been speeding themselves up. They're up to about 64th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and getting back Bay Anongo has been very big for Georgia Tech. He's able to give you 12+ points, 7+ rebounds per game. At times is able to pop it from three. That's not necessarily his forte, though. Kawase Reeves has been able to give you 16 points from three-point range. He's bombing it at about 41.9%. Georgia Tech has legitimately been a top 110 team with their three-point shooting percentage at about 35.8%, but they're outside the top 260 in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. Now, they're a top 25 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage for Georgia Tech. They've been okay on the glass, but they are giving up a lot of second and third chances outside the top 125 there. And for Syracuse, it is big that you get back Donnie Freeman, who looked really good in his first action back. I recognize that it was in a losing effort against Clemson, but he gives his team a big shot in the arm when he's been out there this year. 18.6 rebounds per contest, and nobody else on the roster gives you over 10.7 points per contest. J.J. Starlin's a better three-point shooter at 33%, but Syracuse is collective. They shoot 30.9% from three, around 300th in the country with that regard, but Syracuse has been a top 70 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You do have a Georgia Tech team that has had a tough time in terms of being able to take care of the ball outside the top 280 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and I think that that's enough for Syracuse to be able to get the job done all right. But with these two offenses being very suspect outside the top 150 in terms of points per possession, I think they get a bit of a slog of a game. So my total 142.5. I do like this under, and I'm willing to take 3+ with Georgia Tech. 6-11, 6-12 on the card. Bowling Green is on the road against Kent State, and Kent State is a very slim favorite here. You're going to be laying with them 1 to 1.5 points, and total that is between 158 to 158.5. And with Bowling Green, I made them the 1 point favorite. I like them outright on the money line. For Kent State, this is just not the same team that we've seen in past years. Typically, Kent State is one of the better teams in all of college basketball in terms of generating turnovers. This year, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, down to about 112th, and this Bowling Green team is one of the best at being able to generate turnovers. How about number 10 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis? Not quite as fast as a lot of Ty Simon teams are, but I mean, still 83rd in terms of total possessions per game. It does feel like Bowling Green is starting to crank it up a little bit, and Kent State has been playing too fast for their own good. Right now, they are number 8 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Typically, Kent State is a little bit more of a brisk team, but it's never quite been this. And for Kent State, they got off to a really hot start from three-point range to begin this season. Now they're starting to cool off a little bit more. They're shooting about 35.4% from three. They have shot less than 25% from three in the last 3 games. I do think that heats up a little bit, but for Kent State, really the guy that makes this thing run is Dereko Gillespie. He's been a double-double machine, and if I'm not mistaken, he's either number 2 or number 3 in all of college basketball in terms of total rebounds per game. 19.1 points, 11.7 boards, pair of blocks per contest, and then Morgan Safford has been that main three-point shooter. He shoots 38% from three-point range, 14 points per contest. Sion Medley, he's been a really good facilitator, 6.2 assists, but he does turn the ball over 3.2 times per contest, and that's a big issue that you've got for Kent State. Because they have cranked up their tempo, they have been a team that has been quite sloppy with the ball, going up against a Bowling Green team that is really, really good at generating turnovers. As a matter of fact, for Kent State, 291st in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Bowling Green team that more of a country average team in terms of taking care of the ball, and this is not a Bowling Green team that's going to necessarily completely light you up from three-point range as collective. They shoot about 34% from three. That's country average, but Javonte Campbell, 3.4 steals, 4.5 assists, 5 rebounds, 17.5 points per contest. Meyer Wool, he comes over from Eastern Kentucky, 6'7" big man that shoots 43% 38% from three, 11.5 points per contest. Bowling Green has also been able to do a really good job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. They are going to be tested a little bit here by what DeRocco Gillespie is able to bring to the table, but in terms of percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound for opponents, they're allowing only about 25.4% of those misses to be rebounded. That's number 70 in all of college basketball. And Kent State has been allowing quite a few second and third chances. They're outside the top 100 with this regard. They allow about 27% of misses in their home games to become an offensive rebound. Josiah Shackelford for this Bowling Green team give you 11 points per game, and Justin Thomas, being a nice 40% three-point shooter, I think is just enough for Bowling Green to be able to get the job done, and I do think that the turnovers do cost you an over here. So I did set my total at 155, like the under, and I like Bowling Green on the money line. 613, 614 on the card. South Carolina is going to be on the road against LSU, and LSU is a 6.5 to a 7.5 point favorite. Totals between 146.5 to 147.5. I do like the over. I set my total at a 152.5. Now it's sounding like De'Don Thomas is either not going to play in this game or he's going to be rather limited. He missed their game against Texas A&M over the weekend, but LSU showed that even without De'Don Thomas, this is still a rock solid team. They lose that game by 3 on the road against Texas A&M. In my opinion, absolutely no shame whatsoever in that, and this has been an LSU team that's just been really efficient with their offense. Overall, a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis that goes up to number 10 in their home games, and they've been able to get it from some of their big men as well. As Michael Nwoku has come in, he's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, doing a good job of being able to supply about like 16.5 points per game. And then you've got Max McKinnon, just a do-it-all sort of dynamo, 13.5 points, shoots 44% from three-point range. Markel Sutton has been able to supply about 9 rebounds per game, and this LSU offense is not really even based around three-point shooting. They shoot as a collective 33.2% from the outside. That's below country average, but they do a nice job getting to the free throw line. They're a top 10 team in terms of free throw makes on a per possession basis, as they do shoot 78% at the free throw line, and they're rock solid down low. They're a top 35 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and now you've got a South Carolina team that is doing the little things well on offense. They are a top 15 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, 30th in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. It's an LSU team that is a little bit more mid-tempo, and South Carolina is a bit more slow and controlled. South Carolina 249th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. LSU, they're clocking in more around about 136th, but for South Carolina, I do think that the 30.8% three-point shooting goes up a little bit. Meechie Johnson, 34% three-point shooter, 13.5 points per contest. The Van Wilder of college basketball. And then Mongolian Mike gives you about 12 points, shoots 90% at the free throw line, so he's been strong there. And then Elijah Strong, he does give you 10.5 points, but he shoots less than 26% from three, as a matter of fact, for this South Carolina team. The only guy among your top 6 scorers that does shoot above 32.1% from three is Meechie Johnson at 34, so that's been a little bit of an issue, but I do think that for the South Carolina team, they're going to be able to do the little things to be able to hold in there. This South Carolina team is also shooting about 79.5% at the free throw line. That is a top 5 mark in all of college basketball. They're about country average in terms of getting to the free throw line, and I do think that both of these teams are going to be efficient enough for the over, but I even think with De'Don Thomas being injured right now for LSU, they get the job done. I said LSU as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number, and I like the over, so I total 152.5. 615, 616 on the card. Duke is on the road against Louisville. Louisville finds themselves as a favorite here of 1.5 points in a lot of spots. Now we are starting to see a flip of favorites. There are some books that are now putting Duke as that 1 to 1.5 point favorite. Total is 161.5, and I like Duke here. I did set them as a 2-point favorite. I really wouldn't want to go past the 1.5, but it is a Duke squad that they've been a little bit shaky here to begin conference play, but I do think that they're going to be able to find their bearings, especially with Mikal Brown, the top facilitator for Louisville, perhaps being out of the fold, as this is a Louisville team that they very much are based around 3-point shooting. 54.3% of their shots come from 3-point range. That's the highest mark in all of college basketball. And Duke, they are allowing teams to shoot 30.3% from 3. That's a top 55 3-point shooting defensive mark in all of college basketball. Overall, Duke is 12th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the big key for Duke, in my opinion, we talked about it with our good friend Tristan Freeman of Bustin Brackets, is being able to get a little bit more out of the backcourt, because you know what Cameron Boozer brings to the table. 23 points, 9.8 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, and it's a Duke team that's good but not great with their 3-point shooting at about 35.5%. That's a top 125 mark in all of college basketball, but they're third in the country in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. Patrick Ngangba has been tremendous, block and a half, 11 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Isaiah Nelson has been able to give you a little bit more down low, but after he shot over 40% from 3 last year, only about 35% this year. Caleb Foster has been great from 3 at 44%, but not give you a lot of facilitation, and this has been a Duke team that in their most recent few games, they've been a bit sloppy with the ball. Meanwhile, you do have a Louisville group that we all talk about the offense of this team. They actually have been a pretty rock-solid team with regards to their rebounding and their overall defense, as Sandro Andrew Frew has been able to give you about 7 boards, 11 points per game. You get about 5.5 boards, 10.5 points out of Jovan Hadley as well. You take a look at this Louisville team, and they've been pretty solid in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances. These two teams are actually tied at 37th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Both squads allow opponents to be able to grab about 24% of their misses as an offensive rebound. And for Louisville, they are a top 3 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. But if you look at the defense, they're also a top 20 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home. But again, that Brown injury is going to be hurting them quite a bit. You've got Isaac McNeely, Ryan Conwell, very good sharpshooters in the backcourt, especially Conwell leads way 19.5 points, 4.5 boards, shoots 37.5% from 3. McNeely shoots more around 40% from 3-point range. And Adrian Woolley probably going to be seeing a little bit of an elevated role, 9.5 points per game. But I do think that in the end, Duke does a good job in terms of getting the job done. Duke likes to slow things down away from home, 231st in a road/core venue in terms of total possessions per game. So made it 12-154. I like the under with Duke, whether that be as a money line underdog or laying the point and a half. I'm going to be in on them. 6-17, 6-18 on the card. Michigan is going to be on the road facing off against Penn State. Penn State is a home underdog of 24.5 points, 164.5 to 165.5 is the total. If you've been betting against Michigan, it has been like going in front of a freight train. And you know what? I'm a sucker for Spain. I'm going to go in front of the freight train. I'm taking Penn State here. I set them as a 21.5 point underdog. I'm not sprinkling the money line here, but that said, with this Penn State team, I do believe that they have the goods to be able to, at the very least, hold in there against Michigan. They slow things down, 272nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they're winning the turnover battle. Penn State, 8th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, 36th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis on defense. Now, Michigan is absolutely going to dump truck this team down low. This is a Penn State team that has been well outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage, not necessarily allowing a ton of second and third chances, but they themselves are not grabbing a lot of offensive rebounds. And with this Michigan team, top 5 team, with regards to rebound percentage, Yaxel Lindenwood, 15.7 rebounds per game, Morris Johnson, 6.5 rebounds, Mara, 10.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. So these guys are going to very much dominate down low. But if Michigan has one kryptonite, they're about to earn 8th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis in a road/core venue. Penn State does a solid job there. Now Michigan, they're dominating down low. They're number 1 with their 2-point shooting percentage, and they're number 1 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So for Penn State, there's not going to be a lot to be had there. And Elliot Cadu has done a nice job giving out over 5 assists per contest for this Michigan team. He has really elevated a team that was even worse with regards to their turnovers a season ago. But for Penn State, you've been able to have in the backcourt a pair of freshmen, Mali Tunka, along with Caden Mingo, combined for about 25.5 points per game. And with Tunka, he shoots 39.5% from 3-point range. Mingo, 4.5 assists, 2.5 steals per contest. Freddie De Leon, after a little bit of slow start to the season, he's up to 14 points. He's shooting in the mid-30s from 3. Penn State, not a great 3-point shooting team at 33.5% from the outside, but I mean, with this Penn State team, they've been okay in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances, and with this Penn State team being able to generate the turnovers that they do, I think that they hold in there. Semi-total 163.5. I think that the dead possessions cost you an over, so in on the under and the points here with Penn State. 619, 620 on the card. Ball State is going to be playing against Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan does find themselves as a underdog of 1.5 points. 134.5 is the total, and for Eastern Michigan, set them as a 2.5 point favorite. I do like them outright on the money line. You've got an Eastern Michigan team that it just feels like they're okay in most aspects of things. They really don't have one main strength. They don't really have one main weakness. Eastern Michigan, about 167th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This Ball State defense has not really been great because they gamble for a lot of turnovers. And while Ball State is pretty solid at being able to generate those turnovers, they're not good at anything else. 235th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, for Ball State, if you look at turnovers forced on a per possession basis at home, they are a top 40 team in all of college basketball. And for Ball State, they did a nice job bringing in a guy from UTEP that has really been able to instill this style of being able to generate turnovers in Davon Barnes, 9.5 points per contest out of him. And it's become a whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of team. As right now for this Ball State team, in terms of healthy players, you've got pretty much 8 different guys that give you between 5 and 11.3 points per game, with Davion Hill give you about 11.5 points per contest, but really no 3-point shooting whatsoever. This is a unit that they shoot about 30.7% from 3-point range. That's clocking in the neighborhood about 300th in all of college basketball. They've been dealing with an injury to the Kentucky transfer, Enjoy Hard. Now, he was able to get back out there just before Christmas, but he's injured once again, so that causes for a little bit of an issue there. You just don't have a ton down low, as you've got one guy on the roster, Armani Ziegler, 10.5 points, 5.1 rebounds per game. That gives you over 5 boards per contest as well. So Ball State has been a team that has been well outside the top 235 in terms of rebound percentage, outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Eastern Michigan, you've got really a big three for this team as Carlos Hart, Mohamed Habab, along with Edison Patterson. These three guys are combining for about 39.5 points per contest. Habab at down low 7.5 rebounds per game, and all three of these guys do give you at least 5.5 rebounds per game. Carlos Hart shoots 37% from three. Patterson, he's saying 6'7", he gives you about 2.5 assists per game. So these guys have been able to do a nice job as a trio. It's a little bit more of a top-heavy team, but when it comes to this squad, they do need to look to dish the ball outside, because for Eastern Michigan, they're outside the top 275 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but they become a top 225 team in terms of rebound percentage. I think that that's just enough to get the job done against a Ball State team that's very fragile down low. Neither of these teams are going to be looking to push tempo, especially Ball State at 319th in terms of total possessions per game. You have an Eastern Michigan team that's about 213th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and neither offense has really been that good. Eastern Michigan 262nd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Ball State 315th. So at a total of 132.5, I like the under, and Eastern Michigan, I set them as a 2.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line. 621, 622 on the card. Miami of Ohio is playing goes to Western Michigan. Western Michigan 11.5 to 12.5 point underdogs. 161.5 is the total. Did set a total of 157.5. I like the under. You got a Western Michigan team that's not doing a good job taking care of the ball, hovering in the neighborhood about 270th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they are well outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. To the credit of Western Michigan, they're better with their 3-point shooting than they were a season ago. Last year, they were a bottom 15 team with regards to that 3-point shooting percentage, and they've been able to elevate with the Florida National transfer and Jaden Brewer being a nice edgy suffer, supplying the team with about 13 points, 7.5 rebounds, a block per contest. He only shoots about 28% from 3-point range, and Justice Williams just got back out there on the floor. He had 20 points in the first game that he played for this team, so we'll see if that's able to help them just be able to get a little bit more offense in general. Jalen Griffin, he's up to about 15.5 points, 4.5 assists per contest, but those 14 plus turnovers per game, not great at Western Michigan. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this is a Western Michigan team that's really getting hurt down low. They're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and you've got a Miami of Ohio team that has been solid in terms of winning the turnover battle at home. They are 65th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis in their home games. For Miami of Ohio, they're just shooting it really well from 3, 8th in the country with their 3-point shooting percentage above 40%. Brent Byers has been your main man, 42% 3-point shooter, 15.5 points per contest. Evan Upsero, he shoots 39.5% from 3, 14 points per contest. Omar Edlison, he's a 6 of 7 combo player, comes over from Bradley, doesn't give you a lot of rebounding, but 44% 3-point shooter. And I mean, it's just up and down the boulevard with this Miami of Ohio team. Each out of your top, I'm not even kidding when I say this, 13 scorers are shooting at least 38.7% from 3. Every one of them. Like, it's just insane what you've been able to get out of this team. They've been able to do a rock-solid job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. Now, they themselves are not going to grab offensive rebounds. This is a Miami of Ohio team that's well outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that become an offensive rebound, but also for Miami of Ohio, 45th with regards to that defensive rebound percentage. I think that that's just enough to get you the under, and I think that Miami of Ohio dominates. I set my line at 19.5, 1 to lay with Miami of Ohio, and on the under, I set my total 157.5, 623, 624 on the card. Central Michigan is going to be on the road against Akron, and the Zips of Akron are a 22.5 point favorite. 164.5 to 165.5 is the total. I set my line at 23.5. I'm actually going to be willing to lay it. This is an Akron team that just, in every facet of basketball, is better than the Central Michigan team. A Central Michigan team that has been playing quite slowly, 274th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Akron is looking to play quite a bit faster. They are currently 53rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, Akron is going to allow some second and third chances, 268th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Central Michigan is 301st, and for Central Michigan, the way that you're able to beat this Akron team is if you're able to knock down your shots, and they're really just not doing so. 332nd in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, this is an Akron team that has been very good with regards to their outside shooting, as Akron right now 13th in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. And for Central Michigan, I do think that they went the right route, hiring on a Division II coach that was over at Ferris State a season ago, and Andy Brockma, and I do think that he's going to get things online. You got a 7-footer, Nathan Klebot, who's able to give you about 13 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, but when you're outside the top 330 in terms of your 3-point shooting percentage, this team is well outside the top 275 with regards to rebound percentage. This team is outside the top 200 in terms of generating turnovers. There's just not a lot to be had there, and this team is also outside the top 280 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting shooting percentage. They've actually been halfway respectable in terms of being able to guard the three-point line, but for Akron, you just have weapons upon weapons with Tavari Johnson, 20.5 points, 5 assists right now. He shoots 40% from three-point range, and for this Akron team, each of their top 5 scorers shoot at least 37.5% from three-point range. Armani Lyles, 15.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's shooting 44% from three-point range. Jamal Scott, 12.5 points per contest, and Akron just is very mistake-free. They're a top 35 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis, or a top 10 team with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage as well. I think that Akron has all the goods to just run and hide with this game. I recognize that they give up some second and third chances, so I do think that that's going to help you out with the total. I did set mine at a 167.5, so right now we've got about a 164.5, 165.5. Do like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 23 here with Akron, 625, 626 on the card. Georgetown is going to be on the road against DePaul. DePaul is a 2.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 145.5, and I made Georgetown the 1 point favorite. I like Georgetown on the money line. There's one thing that Georgetown really has going for them. They do a great job in terms of taking care of the ball, and they need to, because this team is shooting 31.2% from three-point range overall, and that goes down to about 26.4% in a road/neutral court venue. In road/neutral court games, Georgetown is outside the top 330 with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage, but they don't take a ton of threes, and this team, number 3 in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis, so they keep things clean, and you got a DePaul team that's more country average in terms of taking care of the ball. And I will say, for this DePaul defense, they have been a top 80 unit in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, but strength of this defense, generating turnovers. They've been a top 95 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis. If you look at what they do in their home games, that goes up to the top 75 in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis, but this is a team that does leave themselves a little bit fragile with regards to their outside shooting percentage. They've actually been good inside. They're a top 35 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, while Georgetown, they themselves are a top 75 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage away from them, so I did set a total of a 143. I'm in on the under, as you've got two relatively mid-tempo teams. Georgetown's about 172nd in terms of total possessions per game. DePaul is about 190th, but Landon Blocker has had to be the main facilitator for the DePaul team, just under 4 assists per contest. Has been able to give you an okay amount of scoring, as he supplies in the neighborhood about 11.5 points per game. He shoots 32% from three-point range. CJ Gunn has been that top scorer, 14.5 points, shoots 35% from three-point range, and then Caleb Banks, RJ Smith as ancillary guys. They combine for about 16 points, both shoot about 37% from three-point range, but this is also a DePaul team that's outside the top 240 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, you've got a Georgetown unit that has been more of a top 200 team with this regard. Georgetown overall has been a top 200 rebound rate team, even with Vincent Iwuchukwu missing the last 7 games, as Julius Halafana has been the guy that has stepped up overall for the season, about 11.5 points, 5 rebounds per contest, had a big giant stinker against St. John's, getting into foul trouble early, but prior to that, he had provided 19 plus points in each of the previous 4 games. I do think that he's going to be able to get back online for this team, and additionally, you've got KJ Lewis and Malik Mack combining for 30 points per game. Mack attack shoots 35% from 3, and Caleb Williams does shoot 35% from 3 as well, but still not a lot of outside shooting for this Georgetown team. But for Georgetown, about a country average team in terms of generating turnovers. They've been able to do an okay job of holding up down low, and I think that that's just enough for them to find a way to get the job done. I think that those clean possessions just allow them to be able to execute just enough to get this win. So Georgetown's 1 point favorite. I like them on the money line, and I'm going to be taking a shot on the under. Semi-total at a 143, as we've got 627, 628 on the card. George Washington, our nation's first president, is on the road against Dayton. Much like the Battle of Trenton, George Washington is an underdog here of 3.5 points. That last game is 154.5, and with George Washington, set them as a 1.5 point underdog. So being able to get the 3.5, I'm going to be one to take the points. Don't necessarily want the money line, as you do have a George Washington team that sometimes can be a little bit sketchy with regards to their defense, and they do face off against a Dayton team that's been a top 10 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. George Washington outside the top 190 in terms of taking care of the ball. They turn the ball over about 12.7 times per contest, but where this George Washington team is going to be able to shine is on the glass. This is a George Washington team that has been able to do a really good job in terms of their rebound percentage. Now, not necessarily so great with regards to their interior defense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage in a road/neutral court venue, but they are not going to allow you to be able to get those second and third chances. 52nd in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You've been able to have Mr. Rafael Castro do a really good job down low, 16.5 points, 7.5 boards. Not a guy that's going to pop it and lock it from 3, but then you've got Trey Drinkins, Christian Jones, along Trey Autry. Pair of guys, or a trio of guys in the backcourt. They combine for about 33.5 points per contest, and they all shoot at least 40% from 3. Garrett Johnson stats up for 12.5 points, right around about 5 rebounds per game. Tyrone Marshall is able to throw in their 5 rebounds per game. This team is like Noah's Ark, in which they've got 2 of everything, and then you've got a Dayton squad that, yes, they are doing a great job in terms of generating those turnovers, but they gamble for turnovers, as they are now allowing teams to shoot over 36% from 3-point range. They are outside the top 315 13 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they're allowing quite a few second and third chances themselves. They're outside the top 145 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and after this team was so good with their 3-point shooting 8 seasons ago, they're down to about 244th, shooting in that neighborhood about 32% from 3. Emil Latang at 7'1" has good versatility, shoots 35.5% for 3, 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Keontae Jones, 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists. He's able to shoot 36% from 3, but Dayton has also been just really not doing a great job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. They're outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They do a great job in terms of turnover front, as they're a top 110 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and Dayton has sped themselves up quite a bit this year. They're up to about 157th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. George Washington about 94th, but I do think that George Washington, even though they're fragile on the inside, I do think that they do enough to be able to hold in this game. I do think that Dayton is going to be able to generate some turnovers to keep it under, so semi-total at a 155.5. I think that late game fouling and just the way that this George Washington team does give it up from 2-point range and the way that Dayton gives it up from 3 does just enough to get you the over. So at a 154.5, I do like the over, and I'm going to take those points with our nation's first president. 629, 630 on the card. Toledo is going to be on the road against Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois, home underdogs of 6.5 points. 156 after 157 half is the total. I did set a total here of a 163. I do like the over, as you've got a Toledo team that's actually played a little bit more mid-tempo this year, about 133rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northern Illinois, about 197th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but this is a Northern Illinois team that they don't do a great job in terms of popping it from 3, and Northern Illinois, man, the turnover issues for them is bad. They're outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, and you've got a Toledo team that's been able to do a tremendous job in terms of being able to elevate in terms of generating turnovers. Now 83rd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And that's a big reason why I'm going to be willing to lay with them. I set them as a 7-point favorite, so don't want to go past 6.5. But that said, you've got a pair of teams that have been suspect with regards to their defenses, to say the least. As this is a Toledo team that they are the classic gamble for turnovers team. They allow opponents to shoot 36.2% from 3-point range. That is 289th in all of college basketball. Northern Illinois is allowing teams at home to shoot 36.8% from 3-point range. That falls well outside the top 290 in terms of home numbers. And you have a Toledo team that maybe isn't quite the same 3-point shooting team that they have been in past years, but you've got Sonny Wilson, who's been able to give you 17 points. He shoots about 35.5% from 3-point range. It's a Toledo team that, as a whole, they're only shooting about 32.5% from 3-point range, but they've still been a top 125 team in terms of points per possession because they're doing the little things. They have been able to do a nice job being a top 110 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and to the credit of this Toledo team, they keep you off the free throw line. They're a top 10 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, while they themselves shoot about 77.7% at the free throw line. That's a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. And for Northern Illinois, they do have a nice sharpshooter in Jayo Atika. He's been around the block. I remember when he was at Marist many years ago. He was rock solid there. He's right now supplying about 35.5% 3-point shooting, 8 points per game. And then Malachi Valentine and Dylan Dukaman have been able to combine for about 27 points per contest. They both combined to shoot about 32.5% from 3. This Northern Illinois team shoots the same as Toledo, about 32.4% from 3-point range. But the one thing that this Northern Illinois team is actually doing a really good job of, they're just finding a way to be able to get offensive rebounds and give themselves second chances. For this Northern Illinois team, they're currently checking in 78th in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They grab over 38% of their missed shots at home as an offensive rebound. That is the top 50 mark in all of college basketball, and they give it up on the defensive side of things. 318th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and they allow at home opponents to grab 36.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. I do think that that's going to be a little bit of doomsday for them, especially with J.J. Taylor still being out of the fold due to injury. G&I Cobb, some of that comes in from Fordham, 7.5 points, right around about 4 assists per contest, but turnovers I think are going to be costly. I think that Toledo turns those turnovers into fast break layups. Semi-total 163. I do like the over, and with Toledo, I'm willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 631, 632 on the card. Central Florida is going to be on the road against Oklahoma State. The Cowboys find themselves as a slim favorite here, as you're going to be laying with them 4.5 points on this game. It is 175.5, and I did set my line at 2.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Central Florida. It's a Central Florida team that plays fast, but not necessarily warp speed fast, and for Central Florida, very interesting with their rebounding, as they're solid on the defensive glass, about 99th in all of college basketball in terms of rebound percentage. They're a top 10 team in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, while Oklahoma State about 89th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so I think that that's going to be presenting some issues for them. As for Central Florida, You've had Riley Kugel be the main scorer for the team, but now you've got a quartet of guys that give you at least 12.2 points per contest. JaMychal Stilwell, 12 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Kugel, 14 points on 38.5% three-point shooting. And then Themis Folks, 45% three-point shooter, 6.8 assists, 13.5 points per contest. Jordan Burks, 13.5 points. He shoots 40% from three-point range. And then you've got some depth with someone like Devin Cambridge, who's been able to be a nice mixer and shaker, 6 points, about 4.5 rebounds per game. And for Oklahoma State, this is a team that is looking to play at warp speed. Top 10 team in terms of total possessions per game. Anthony Roy missed the first few games of the season, but since he's come back, 17.5 points per contest. He shoots 46% from three. Victorious Miller, 45.5% three-point shooter, 15 points per contest. After that, you really just don't have anyone else on the roster that shoots above 33% from three-point range, but you do have an Oklahoma State team that's been okay in terms of generating turnovers. Top 175 team with that regard. They're outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' two-point and three-point shooting percentage, but top 75 team in terms of knifing the ball inside. They're top 50 team in terms of their overall percentage of possessions that end in a free throw as well. So I think that that's going to help them out big time in this spot. I do think that home court advantage is going to be big as well. But for the Central Florida team, I do think that even though they have slowed down their tempo a little bit, they're still going to be able to get great three-point shots. As for the Central Florida team, 15th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. That actually goes up to 40% in a road/neutral venue. And while Oklahoma State is not the world's worst three-point shooting percentage defense, it's not like they're necessarily batting down the hatches there. They do allow teams to shoot about 33.5% for three, 175th. And I do think that you're going to get a bit of an up-and-down game. Central Florida can get a little bit sloppy with the ball. They've been turning the ball over 12 times per contest. Oklahoma State outside the top 2 in terms of ball security. I think that that's just enough for you to get the under here. I semi-total at a 172.5 with Central Florida slowing down their tempo a little bit. So in on the under and I'm going to take 3+ here with Central Florida. 633, 634 on the card. It is Iowa on the road against Minnesota. The state with the smallest strengths in the union. Minnesota is a 6.5 point home underdog. 130.5, 131.5 is your total. And a semi-total 128.5. I do like the under. Iowa playing just so slowly right now. In terms of total possessions per game, a nice hearty 362nd. And in their road games, that's taken last in terms of total possessions per game. So we are going to get ourselves a slog with Minnesota 337th in terms of total possessions per game. And this has been a Minnesota team that just has not been able to get a lot going from three-point range. But at home, their allowing teams only shoot 26.7% from three-point range. That has legitimately been a top 40 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, they themselves are shooting about 35% from three at home. That goes down to 31% away from home. So they've been able to work their way up there. This is an Iowa team that, though they play very, very slowly, they're just really efficient. They're right now shooting 38.4% from three, 23rd in all of college basketball. That does go down to about 35.5% away from home, but that's a really good clip. And in terms of points per possession, Iowa, again, not a lot of possessions. They're number 9 in all of college basketball, but for Iowa, they're also averaging about 32.5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. A little bit of a byproduct of a small sample size of road games, but still, I do think that for Iowa, they do find a way to get the job done because they've also been a top 15 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Bennett Surtz is your lone double-figure scorer, 18 points. He's been able to shoot about 43.5% from three-point range, and your top 4 scorers on this Iowa team that have made at least one three are all shooting at least 41.7% from three-point range, and for Iowa, not going to generate a lot of second and third chances while outside the top 250 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Their line teams only shoot about 30.5% from three. That's the top 75 mark in all of college basketball. And then for this Minnesota team, you've been able to have Cade Tyson just really take over games. 22 points, 5 boards, shoots 39.5% from three-point. And then Jalen Crocker-Johnson, 13 points, 7 boards, a block. He shoots 36% from three. Nobody else on the roster shoots above 32.5% from three-point. Isaac Kusama has been able to give you about 4.4 assists per game. It's a Minnesota team that's done a great job keeping teams off the free throw line. Top 125 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis. But I think that you're in for a slow slog of a game. And when it comes to pulling out slow slogs, there are a few teams better than a Ben McCollum coach team, and I do think that Iowa just does a better job of executing rather than a Minnesota team that's been a little bit suspect around the outside. So I did set my line at an 8.5, want to lay up to 8 with Iowa, in on the under semi-total 128.5, 635, 636 on the card. SIU Edwardsville plays host at Lindenwood, and Lindenwood finds themselves as a road favorite of 1.5 points. 141.5 is the total, and made a total of a 138.5. I do like the under. Now, you're going to have a little bit of a tempo war here, as for Lindenwood, they're currently 31st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Edwardsville is 259th in the country, but this has been an SIU Edwardsville team that over the last few seasons has been able to play some good rock-solid defense and some not-so-great offense. Right now, for Edwardsville, they're about 281st in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. It actually goes down at home. They're well outside the top 300 there. Meanwhile, for Lindenwood, 266th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, as both both of these teams have really had their turnover woes. You've got a Lindenwood team that right now is outside the top 190 in terms of their ball security. SIU Edwardsville, they are about 156th now in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but I do think that for Edwardsville, they do find a way to be able to get the job done because I do think that they're going to have a little bit of a leg up on the glass. Right now, they're a country average team with regards to rebound percentage, and this is a Lindenwood team that has been a little bit up and down with regards to being able to grab second and third chances. They're a top 110 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but not necessarily ideal size on this team, though you've been able to have really good versatility from a guy that really doesn't shoot threes at all, but at 6'5" Jadis Jones, 16 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. He plays a little bit bigger than his size. And then Aeneas Fattrell, he had 6'5", shoots about 37.5% from three, 15 points per contest. With this Lindenwood team, they're actually a really good perimeter defense. They're a top 45 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and they've been able to ascend into the top 175 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they're much stronger around the outside. And this is an SIU Edwardsville team that year in and year out, they base themselves around being able to knife the ball inside, and they really don't take a ton of threes. This is an Edwardsville team that is in the top 85 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from two-point range in their own games. At home, they take about 68.5% of their shots from inside the three-point line. And this Edwardsville team, it's been all about ring Belaith being able to be the ring leader. 17 points, 5.5 boards, shoots about 33% from three. Team as a whole, they shoot about 33.5% from three-point range, but still, a team has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of generating second and third chances. Top 150 team in terms of percentage of their own missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound. Top 100 team in terms of the opponent's two-point shooting percentage, and this team is doing a pretty good job in terms of being able to generate turnovers. While it's not a terrible team in terms of taking care of the ball in Lindenwood, I do think that way that SIU Edwardsville induces dead possessions, they at home are generating 17 turnovers per game, which is just absolutely insane. And with their slow pace in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, if you look at the home games and the home games only, this has been a top 10 team in all of college basketball with that regard. I do think that that's going to be enough to be able to get the job done in a little bit of a lower scoring game. I did set my line at 2.5. I'm willing to take SIU Edwardsville on the money line and do like the under as well. 637, 638 on the card. Texas A&M is on the road against Auburn, and Auburn finds themselves as a favorite here of 6.5 points. 167.5 is the total, and South Auburn as a 6.5 point favorite. So 7+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with A&M. Now you've got Mackenzie Mbakbo now out for the season for A&M, but you still have 9 different guys that give you at least 12 minutes per game. There's just a lot of versatility on this team. Ruben Dominguez has been the top scorer, 13.5 points. He shoots 46.5% from three-point. And this is an A&M team that's legitimately been a nice three-point shooting team at about 37.5%. That's a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. They go up against an Auburn team that's really not going to be forcing the issue. This Auburn team outside the top 185 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, while you've got an A&M team that has been very good in terms of generating turnovers. How about 21st in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis? Quite a bit more pedestrian with regards to that when they're away from home. And this is the classic team of gambling for turnovers. As for Texas A&M, they're also outside the top 190 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage at about 34%, but they allow opponents to shoot 38.2% from three-point range at home, 25.2% away from home. We should see that iron out just a little bit, and this has been an Auburn team that's been a little bit suspect with their three-point shooting. Taj Pettiford is right now shooting less than 32% from three-point range, and just honestly is not taking the stride forward I thought he would this year. He's still giving the team 15 points, 3 assists per contest, but 30.9% three-point shooting, 2.5 turnovers per game, a little bit suspect, as Keyshawn Hall has been the head of the snake for the team. 20 points, 8 boards, he shoots 40% from three, and Auburn does shoot 34.7% from three-point. Forte of Auburn is getting to the free throw line. They're a top 12 team in terms of free throws on a per possession basis, and this has been an Auburn team that's been able to do, thanks to having Keyshawn Murphy along with having Hall down low, a great job on the offensive glass. 18th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots. That results in an offensive rebound. A&M has been very solid as well. They grabbed 35.7% of their misses as an offensive rebound in a road/core venue. That's actually a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. And both of these teams have been allowing quite a few second and third chances themselves. This is an Auburn group that is outside the top 150 with regards to their defensive rebound percentage. A&M, they're more around about 80th in the country, but that falls outside the top 80 when they're away from home as well. You've got an Auburn team that as well, seeing Kevin Overton really do a nice job from the outside. He and Elijah Freeman both shoot between 36 and 37% for three, combined 23 points per contest. Auburn is a fast team, but not necessarily a warp speed team. Well, Texas A&M is a warp speed team. A&M currently 10th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Auburn is 72nd. Did set a total of 164.5. I do think that for the Texas A&M A&M team, dealing with the injury to Mbakpo is going to be hurting them just a little bit, and I do think that you get just good enough defense for the under, especially with A&M generating those turnovers. Then with this Texas A&M team, I'm going to be willing to take anything of 7 or more with them. 6 or less will be willing to lay it with Auburn right now, seeing a 7.5 come onto the board. That'd be my buy point on A&M to go along with that under. 639, 640 on the card. New Mexico is going to be on the road against Colorado State. Colorado State is a underdog of 1.5 points. 142.5 to 144.5 is the total. I made a total of a 140.5. I'm in on the under. Colorado State has actually been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. Currently for Colorado State, they are checking in 364th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And New Mexico, very much more a mid-tempo team, 181st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Name of the game for New Mexico is generating turnovers, top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Colorado State, name of the game for them is being able to pop it and lock it from three-point range. Colorado State has been one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball, while being outside the top 240 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But for Colorado State, right now from three-point range, they shoot 42.1%. That is number 2 in all of college basketball, and they were behind Yale going into the day on Monday. Depending upon how that goes, they might be number 1 by the time you listen to this podcast. Not a team that's going to give you a lot of second and third chances, but we've had Kyle Jorgensen in the backcourt do a nice job, step it up, giving you about 12.5 points. He is able to also supply the team with about 5.5 rebounds per game. Now, has dealt with a little bit of injury. He missed 3 games, and he's probably going to be out for this game once again. That has been affecting this Colorado State team, but even if he's out of the fold, you've got Kerry Booth, who shoots about 45.5% for 3, 12.5 points per game. Josh Passarelli, 13 points on 45% three-point shooting. Brian Redsteiner, 43.5% three-point shooting, 12 points per contest. So you've got a trio of guys that give you 12 plus points per contest to make sure that the fall-off isn't necessarily going to be too steep there. It is a Colorado State team that I feel like they've gotten a little bit better with regards to their defense. This has been a unit that has been up, down, all around with that regard, but did old Grand Canyon over the weekend, did just 60 points, and someone like a Jevon Muniz was able to give you 9 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists per game. That sort of versatility I do think is big, and for New Mexico, it's been the D2 transfer that's really been able to step up and help this team out in year number 1 under the Eric Olin style, and Jay Cole, 13 points. He's been able to shoot about 36.5% from 3 points for a New Mexico team that they shoot about 32.5% from 3. They are outside the top 225 in all of college basketball. They themselves have been a really good 3-point shooting defense, so right now they are allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from 3-point range, and they're pretty much daring teams to shoot it from the outside. Over 51% of opponents' shots come from 3-point range. That is actually number 3 in all of college basketball, but you do have to fear that perhaps there's going to be a little bit of a fall off with this 3-point shooting percentage defense when they're away from home, as it's a New Mexico team that is allowing teams to right now shoot about 29.5% from 3-point range in both home and road venues, but haven't had a lot of road games thus far, and with Colorado State being a team that has been a little bit more suspect with regards to their defense, but still has been able to do an okay job inside, not allowing a ton of second and third chances. They do allow opponents to shoot about 34% from 3-point range. I do think that this is going to be a game slow enough for the under, semi-total on 140.5, but I do think that Colorado State, even with New Mexico doing such a great job with regards to perimeter defense, they find a way to execute. Semi-line at 2.5 with Colorado State being the favorite. I like them on the money line, and I'm going to be in on this total under as well. 641, 642 on the card. UCLA is going to be on the road against Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a 3.5 point favorite. 152.5 is the total, and I made Wisconsin the 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to take the points. Now, a lot of travel for UCLA, and they were whining and complaining about it a season ago, but UCLA is getting back to their roots. They're playing pretty slow and controlled, 254th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But Wisconsin really gunning it. They're 89th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and this has been a Wisconsin group that has been a bit suspect with their 3-point shooting. They allow opponents to only shoot 29.2% from 3-point range at home, 40.1% away from home. I do think that those splits are going to be ironing out, and Wisconsin has been a very clean and efficient team in terms of not turning the ball over, top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, once again shooting well above 76% at the free throw line, but right now they're 222nd with their 3-point shooting percentage at 32.6%, while UCLA has actually been a flamethrower from 3, 20th in the country at 38.8%. That goes to 39.8% in a roadside shoot-to-court venue, so I'm willing to take the points with them, and for UCLA, they're back to doing a solid job in terms of generating turnovers, so that's going to be a little bit strength on strength with the way that Wisconsin takes care of the ball. UCLA, top 60 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Tyler Bilodeau has been their main man, 18.5 points. He from 3-point range, she's about 42.5% for 35 boards per contest, and with UCLA, they're not going to grab a lot of second and third chances. They've been a little bit shaky on the glass outside the top 110 with regards to their overall rebound percentage, but they've also been pretty good with their perimeter defense, allowing teams to shoot less than 31% from 3-point range. Sky Clark, Donovan Dent in the backcourt both give you 13.5 points per game, with Dent, main facilitator, 6.5 assists per game, and Sky Clark is right now shooting 48.5% from 3-point range. Jerome Berry has been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3-point range, and for Wisconsin, you've got your two guys in Nick Boyd along with John Blackwell doing a tremendous job, combined for 37 points per game. Blackwell shoots 37.5% from 3, 5 boards, so you don't have per contest, and Boyd, he only shoots about 30% from 3, but 3 assists per game with Wisconsin. You've been able to get good execution down low. I know Winter, his 3-point shooting is down to 29%, but 14.5 points, 9.5 rebounds per game for Wisconsin. They're doing a good job in terms of not allowing second and third chances as well. They have been a top 60 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and I do think that that's going to be big in terms of keeping this total under, especially in their home games. Wisconsin has been able to allow teams to only grab about 20.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That said, I do think that with the way that UCLA has done a great job with regards to perimeter defense, with the way that Wisconsin is a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range, and the way that they're just not knocking them down, that UCLA is going to be able to hold in this game and slow it down. So somehow line at 1.5, I'm willing to take the points with UCLA. Somehow total 147.5, I like the under. 643, 644 on the card. Houston plays host to Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a underdog of 6.5 points, 141.5 to 140.5 is a total, and made a total of a 138. I do like the under for Texas Tech. They're a relatively mid-tempo team, 177th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Houston is back to playing slow and controlled, 310th in the country with this regard, and I know that Houston, for a little bit of time, has had some cracks in the defense, and the rebounding has not been the same. 117th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are grabbing about 27% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, but despite the fact that Texas Tech has JT Toppin, they're actually worse at 166th, with Texas Tech. Toppin has obviously been able to be the topper for this team. 21 points, 10.8 boards. Not a guy that's going to shoot a bunch of threes or anything like that, but Christian Anderson, he fills that void. 20.5 points, 7.5 assists. He shoots 43.5% from 3. Donovan Atwell's been a 43% 3-point shooter, and Texas Tech has been a pretty good sizzler with their offense. They're a top 30 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, but where you can really hurt this Houston team, once again, is a little bit more down low, which, again, that's a little bit strange for them because typically that's their strength. You still have Joseph Tugler give you 5.5 plus rebounds per game, and he's been able to give you over a block per contest, and Chris Senek over 7 rebounds per contest as well. And for Houston, even though they're not as strong on the glass, they're still number 4 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis overall. If you look at their home games and their home games only, Gonzaga is the lone team that is giving up fewer points on a per possession basis than them. And for the Texas Tech team that has been able to shoot it so well from 3-point range, Houston still doing a great job with regards to perimeter defense. Teams are shooting just 29% from 3-point range against them. Meanwhile, Texas Tech, they are allowing teams in a roadside shoot record venue to shoot 37.9% from 3-point range. Now, Milos Uzan is still shooting less than 30.5% from 3-point range, but was able to heat up in that game against Cincinnati. He's been, even with his cold shooting, give you about 11.5 points, 4.5 assists per contest. As Kingston Flemings and Emmanuel Sharp, they both give you between 15.5 to 16 points per contest. Fleming shoots 44% from 3, 39.5% out of Sharp, and Houston is still clocking in outside the top 25 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But even with them giving up some second and third chances, they've been a top 40 team in terms of grabbing second and third chances themselves. And right now for this Houston team, they continue to be one of the best teams in terms of winning the turnover battle, as Houston is not going to turn the ball over themselves on offense in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. On offense right now, they're checking in 14th in all of college basketball, and they're a top 15 team in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis. And Texas Tech, to their credit, 29th in terms of taking care of the ball on offense. I think that this is going to be a slowed down game, and I do think that Houston finds it once again on defense. So semi-total at a 138. I like the under, and want to lay up to 7.5 here with Houston. 645, 646 on the card. Texas, they are on the road against Tennessee. Tennessee, 9.5 to 10.5 point favorites. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total. Made by total 148. I do like the under. You've got a Tennessee team that has been relatively mid-tempo this year, and really the same goes for Texas. Texas, right now in terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in more around about 129th at all of college basketball. Tennessee, they're 187th, and for Tennessee, I recognize that maybe the defense isn't quite the same as it has been in past years, and what has really been the fall for them has been 227th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. That's the guy Ziegler factor coming in there, but Tennessee is still 15th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. If you look at home games and home games only, that creeps back into the top 10, and this has been a Texas team that has been giving up about 22 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. But I do think that at a 10.5 plus, they do just just enough to be able to hold in there. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now with Texas, one thing that they've been able to do a really good job of is not allowing second and third chances, and that's been the forte of Tennessee. Tennessee leads the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're grabbing over 42% of their misses as an offensive rebound, but Texas top 50 team with regards to that defensive rebound percentage, with Mateos Volkatis being able to give you 16.6 boards. He's been a main guy there, and Dalen Swain, who followed with Sean Miller on over from Xavier. He's been a really, really nice find. 16.5 points, 3.5 assists, 1.7 steals. He only shoots about 29% from three. And Texas as a whole, pedestrian, 33.8% three-point shooting team, with Draymond Mark only shooting 28% from the outside, but Simeon Wilcher has been a 40% three-point shooter. Shandell Weaver has been able to give you about 7 points, 5 rebounds per game, and I think that that's just enough to hold in there against a Tennessee team that, again, just has been really sloppy with the ball. They're average team in terms of generating turnovers, but they've been really good with regards to their percentages. Top 50 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and you've got Nate Amond, who's been able to give you 15.6 half boards. He's been great down low, only shooting about 28.5% from three. Tennessee shoots about 34.5% from the outside, with the ancillary guys like Amari Abraham, Amari Phillips. These guys have been able to give you about 36% three-point shooting. JP Estrella, when he's been out there, has actually been really good with 10.5 points, 5 boards. Has shot 50% from three, albeit on a very small sample size of threes. But I do think that even though Tennessee is such a great offensive rebounding team, that Texas does a relatively solid job down low. I think that the Tennessee defense is going to be very rock solid here, and I do think that turnovers cost Tennessee a cover on anything above 10. I set my line at 10, so I'd personally rather take 10.5 with Texas rather than lay 9.5 with Tennessee. So looking at the under and those points with Texas, 647, 648 on the card. TCU on the road against Kansas. Kansas is a 7.5 point favorite. Saw this game between 137.5 to a 138, and with Kansas made them a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This is a TCU team that continues to be tremendous with their defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Right now, they check in at number 11 in all of college basketball. If you look at them in a road/shoot score venue, this TCU team, number 4 in the country, but Kansas is able to match up with that really well. I recognize that over the weekend it was a little bit more shaky against UCF, but still 23rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, number 3 at home, and now they've got Darren Peterson back in the fold, and that's going to be big for them because Peterson has been limited to injury all season long, but when he's been out there, 20.5 points, 4 boards, and he's your main 3-point shooter at 44% for a team that they shoot about 35.5% for 3. Trey White, 41% 3-point shooter, 14.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Flory Badunga should be able to control things down low, 9 boards, 2.5 blocks per game, and TCU, their forte is generating turnovers. Top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Kansas not going to do any of that. Kansas is actually a bottom 5 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they go up against a TCU team that they do an okay job taking care of the ball. Top 25 team with that regard. TCU, country average team with regards to really 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They've been really good on the glass, so they've been a top 50 team with regards to overall rebound percentage, with David Punch give you that punch down low, 2.5 blocks, 7.5 boards, 14 points per game. Brock Harding, I like with his 9 points, about 6 assists per contest, and then Xavier Edmonds shoots 45.5% for 3, 10.5 points per contest, and Jaden Pierre also shooting over 40% for 3, 10.5 points per game. But I do think that in the end, for the CCU team, they are still very suspect with regards to their overall offense. This has been a very rock solid defensive team, and I think that both of these teams do a pretty solid job defensively, but I think that Kansas just gets a really, really nice jolt from Darren Peterson being back out there. I think that this has a propensity to be just close enough for late game falling. So set a total of 139.5. I like the overhand with Kansas. Set them as a 9.5 point favorite. I'm willing to lay up to 9 with them. 649, 650 on the card. Utah State is on the road against Air Force. Air Force is an underdog of 21.5 points. So on this game, it is 137.5. I set Utah State as a 20.5 point favorite. So here at 21, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Air Force. It's a grody Air Force team that couldn't get past 40 points against UNLV. That was not great, to say the least. They are at elevation at home, but I mean, if you look at the last few years, this has done nothing for them whatsoever because they've been such a sad program. You do, though, have a trio of guys that give you between 11.5 and 12.5 points per contest, and Caleb Walker, Cam Sanders, along with Lucas Hoblin, and then with Walker and Sanders, a combined about 9.3 rebounds per game. This team is just terrible, the rebound battle. I mean, they're outside the top 290 with regards to overall rebound percentage, outside the top 340 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're giving themselves no second and third chances, and typically Air Force is a respectable 3-point shooting team. They're shooting less than 30% as a collective. It's not great, to say the least, but they're more of a country average team in terms of guarding the three-point line. They become a top 225 team in terms of generating turnovers. Now, they don't do a good job in terms of taking care of the ball themselves. They're well outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but now you go up against a Utah State team that is fast, but not necessarily warp speed fast, 173rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Utah State has been really good defensively. They are overall 35th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but if you look in a roadside score venue, that actually goes into the top 12 in all of college basketball, and much of it is due to the fact that this team is good at being able to generate turnovers, 7th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and MJ Collins has been able to give you 20 plus points per contest, rock solid three-point shooter for a Utah State team that they do shoot 37.2% from three-point range away from home. That's a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. Additionally, Mason Fosloff has been very versatile, 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. Kobe King is 42% three-point shooter. Utah State is going to be able to win this game handily. They're also a top 30 team with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage. Do you think that the number is getting a little bit out of whack, though? Utah State, they themselves have been about a country average team in terms of taking care of the ball. They're allowing a few second chances, and I do think that Air Force at home does just enough to hold in there, and I do think that Air Force is going to be slowing down this game just a little bit because they're a natural style. They're 304th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, allows for that. So set a line of 20.5. You're at 21 plus. We'll take those points with Utah State. And I think that Utah State executes on offense. Somebody told 138.5, so at 138 or less in on the over. 651, 652. NC State is on the road against Boston College. Boston College, a 12.5 to a 13.0 underdog. 140.5 is the total. And for NC State, I did set them as a favorite of 13.5 points. So we'll lay up to 13 with them. For Boston College, there's just absolutely no execution on offense for them. Boston College is actually a relatively respectable defense, but 348th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. I mean, Boston College, they're actually taking care of the ball as well. This Boston College team is 52nd in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, so they're trying to make the most out of their possessions, but along with that wretched three-point shooting percentage, they're 265th in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, so it makes it just a very difficult buy there. And then you've got an NC State team that has been able to bomb it from three-point at about a 37.9% clip. That's a top 50 mark in all of college basketball, with Paul McNeil Jr. being the surprise top scorer. Ian Kadir Copeland, 14.1 points per contest. Copeland follows Will Wade on over from McNeese, 5.8 assists, 2.5 per contest. NC State doing a great job taking care of the ball themselves. Top 70 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and it's a Boston College team that's very much content to play slow and controlled. At home, they're outside the top 290 in terms of total possessions per game. NC State, about 142nd in terms of total possessions per game. So fast, but not warp speed fast. And then they've got some solid rebounding out of Van Allen Lubin, 7 boards, 12.5 points. Capable of shooting it from 3 as well. And for NC State, you just have good versatility with this team, as they've been a little bit suspect down low. They're outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they're really not allowing a lot of second and third chances. And that's going to be hurting this Boston College team because they just don't knock down any of their first shots as well. So very much suspect with that regard. You've got a Boston College team, though, that I do think is going to be able to keep this relatively low scoring because, again, this has been a team that defensively has been very respectable. NC State, they're about 71st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do allow about 18 points more per 100 possessions away from home. Boston College, surprisingly, 32nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so they've been able to do a nice presentable job there. But that said, with this Boston College team, I just don't think that they really are able to knock down shots against NC State, and I do think that NC State finds a way to get the job done. I do think that NC State just continues to be very efficient with their own offense. So I did set my total at a 143.5. I do think the Boston College due for a little bit of positivity with that three-point shooting, so in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 13 here with NC State. 653, 654 on the card. Fresno State is on the road against San Jose State. Old San Jose State is a 1.5 home underdog. Total on this game, 145.5 with San Jose State. I set them as a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be one take a shot on them outright on the money line. Now, you do have a Fresno State team that has been much better with regards to their defense. They are now 111th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this has been a San Jose State team that has had their issues with regards to their defense. How about 316th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they are giving up about 17.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than in a roadside score venue. And Fresno State has been a really good perimeter defense, but their perimeter offense is not so great. 249th in the country with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage, while San Jose State, they've been a top 110 team, knocking down about 35.3% of their three-point shots, and a big reason why Kobe Garland, he comes over from the Big South, and he has been big time with about 20 points, 4 assists per contest, shoots about 35.5% from three-point range. You've been dealing with the injury to Ben Rosenberger, who was a good three-point shooter for them, and Javon Hanna has been dealing with injury. Adrian Myers has been another guy that's been a little bit banged up, so it's been up, down, all around, but Myers is back. He's been able to give the team double figures in 2 out of the last 4 games. He's able to give you some 3-point shooting, and then down low, Yafat Mundi, the transfer from Iona, 7.5 boards. He's able to give you about 12.5 points per game for a San Jose State team that's been well outside the top 3 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They have been a country average team in terms of generating turnovers, and this has been a Fresno State unit that has had a difficult time being able to take care of the ball. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Top 75 team in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense, but this has also been a Fresno State team that, while they've been great allowing teams to shoot less than 29% from 3-point range, they're outside the top 320 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You've got Jake Heidbreder, 19 points per game. He shoots about 34.5% from 3-point range, and you've got Deshaun Gorey shooting about 33% from 3, but still a team that only shoots about 31.5% from 3-point range. Deion Collins, 13 points, 5 assists. He's been able to do a solid job there, and Jack Mani, who's been missing for a few games, he's been able to come back, give the team about 7 points per contest, but I do think that you're going to get a little bit more of a slow down slog of a game with the way that San Jose State just really doesn't push tempo. 291st in terms of total possessions per game. Fresno State, they're fast, but they were certainly not as fast as they were a season ago, 118th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I did set a total here of a 145. At the 145.5, like the under in San Jose State, I do like them outright on the money line, made them a 3-point favorite. 655, 656. You've got Wyoming play on, say, UNLV. UNLV is an underdog of 3.5 points. 157.5 is the total. With Wyoming, I made them a 9-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. UNLV coming off of holding Air Force to like 40 points over the weekend. That was absolutely insane. But that said, now you have to go up against a Wyoming team that is going to be playing at elevation, and this is a Wyoming team that they've got the edge in so many different ways. UNLV, 28.6% 3-point shooting team. They're 136th in all of college basketball, and they're 133rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Wyoming has been a rock-solid defense. They are hovering in that neighborhood about 67th in terms of points per possession allowed. Wyoming is fast, but not like breakneck pace fast. 121st in terms of total possessions per game. UNLV has really gunned it. They're currently 30th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for UNLV, they are getting healthier. The true 7-footer in Emmanuel Stevens, he was missing for the first 10 or so games of the season. He's been able to get back out there, and he's been coming off the bench mostly in this 5 games, but 8.6 half boards. He's able to give this team a little bit of an impact down low. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn has been able to give you 17 points per contest, and with UNLV, they're very much looking to knife the ball down low. This team, with their bad 3-point shooting, they become a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the arc, and to the credit of UNLV, top 125 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but UNLV is giving up a lot of second and third chances as well. This has been a team that's been well outside the top 150 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and you got a Wyoming team that does a great job in terms of generating second and third chances, 50th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and this is despite the fact that Wyoming really doesn't have that one guy that's going to give you a bunch of rebounds or anything like that. It's just a whole is greater than some of its parts approach, much like their coach in Sundance Wicks, just nice and gritty. As a matter of fact, not a single guy on the roster gives you over 5 rebounds per game. You've got Mataj Bella, Caden Bennett, along this year Meyer, all between 4.5 and 5 rebounds per game. Meyer has been a 13-point per game scorer that shoots 42.5% from 3 points, and then Lowell Walker does a bit of everything. 4 assists, 3.2 boards, 13.5 points, shoots about 33% from 3 points. With Wyoming just doing the little things well. They're a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis at home. They've been really limiting teams in terms of their overall 3-point shooting as well. This is a Wyoming team that's a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that Wyoming gets the job done, and Wyoming has been playing significantly faster at home rather than on the road, about 4 or 5 possessions per game faster at home. So I did set my total at 161. I do like the over, and I'm willing to lay with Wyoming, set them as a 9-point favorite, and wrap things up with 657, 658. Nevada is going to be playing us to San Diego State. San Diego State is an underdog of 1.5 points. So on this game, 143.5 to 145.5. I'm starting to see a pick'em price out there as well, and at a pick'em, I would be looking at Nevada. I did set Nevada as the 1.5 point favorite. San Diego State, have to wonder how they respond after they win in triple overtime against Boise State. San Diego State typically is a team that they play fast in non-conference play, and then they slow down in conference play. Right now for San Diego State, 50th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Completely warped set, because they had so many possessions in that game against Boise State, that's not even funny, and they had a double overtime game against Troy. If you look at possessions per 40 minutes, they're probably still a little bit above nation average, but I do think that they're going to slow down a little bit, and for San Diego State, they're shooting above 39% from 3-point range. That's a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. I think that you see a little bit of regression there. BJ Davis is right now shooting 51% from 3 with 13 points per contest. That's not going to continue. Now, for San Diego State. What I think will continue is the turnovers. They're generating about 15.5 turnovers per game. They're a top 45 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So I do like what they're doing there. And this is sort of a team that is going to do an okay job in terms of grabbing second and third chances. They're about 121st in the country in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, but where they shine is really not allowing other teams to be able to get really good second and third chances. As for the Nevada team, they're right now allowing teams only grab about 23.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound at home. And for the Nevada team, they've done a really exceptional job of taking care of the ball. 8.9 turnovers per game. That is a top 7 mark in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they need to take advantage of all of these possessions because they have been really not a good team inside. They're outside the top 2 in 90 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Very good from 3-point range, though. This Nevada team right now from 3-point range, they've been able to shoot in that neighborhood about 36% from the outside. They actually shoot over 40% in a road/neutral court venue. Meanwhile, you've got a San Diego State team that they've got some home and road splits with their 3-point shooting, 42.5% at home, 37.1% away from home. And I do think that for Nevada, what's going to be key for them is the duo of Tyshawn Comer along Corey Camper in the backcourt. These two guys have been able to combine for 29 points per contest. Camper was dealing with a little bit of an injury, returned in that game against Fresno State only for 23 minutes. They eased him back, so I think that he's going to be back in a little bit more full force in this game. And then you've got Elijah Price, give you about 11 points, 8 rebounds per contest. He's able to pop it in the mid-30s from the outside as well. Joel Armitage has done a nice job being able to supply about 5.5 rebounds per game. Nevada, about a country average team in terms of generating turnovers. Nothing special, but nothing awful there. And for this Nevada team, not necessarily a team that's going to be pushing a bunch of tempo. Right now, about 285th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more a defense-oriented game. And for San Diego State, I just don't think that they get the same amount of turnovers on this Nevada team. And I think that Nevada's ability to be able to take care of the ball, that's just enough for them to get the job done. Willing to lay up to 1 point with Nevada. Did set them as the favorite of 1.5 points. And here at a 142 plus in on the under. And that'll wrap things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Tristan Freeman, who does such amazing work over at Bustin Brackets. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, naming does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast with tips and analysis on every game, every day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.